This is Henry. This is in Sunwind Gardens, and I thought I'd do a detail about how this tree's been pruned and how all of the trees here have been pruned and how they're put in the ground, because it's kind of unique to this, and it doesn't really match what some pruning styles are that are currently really popular. This method produces very wide, powerful, strong crotches that don't pick up a lot of debris, and they don't have a narrow angle, so they don't split off. And so it starts off that placement in the ground is really important. This entire ground is mulched, and probably 4 inches down there's a layer of plastic that sets all of the grade and the drainage under the gravel and under this ground bark. When a tree goes in, you move back the mulch or the gravel, whatever's there, and you make a cross in the plastic and you fold it under. You dig your hole, plant your tree, you make sure the graft is at the right level above the surrounding ground. Then you backfill 4 inches below the level of the soil up to just below the graft with gravel, which is held in place by those bricks. Bricks all over in this garden are separators, and you can use any solid thing. Don't use wood because it rots and it harbors insects and all kinds of stuff, and it's not permanent. After a long enough time, wood just turns into this mulch, the ground bark. Some of these have been in the ground for 12 years, and the lesson was learned is that I had a really nice loquat tree, and the ground came right up to the trunk, and I came out one morning and it was laying on the ground, and some grub had gotten inside and eaten around. At that point I started doing it with the gravel, slightly below grade, the bricks to hold it in place, and I've never had a problem since. It also means that because the mulch around it is not disturbed and the plastic under the mulch isn't disturbed, only where the tree is and it's folded back, then filled with this gravel, it makes a wonderful place to water this tree, and it doesn't get any rot at all. So that's how they go in the ground. The bricks or rocks or whatever simply keep two different kinds of loose material apart. It's kind of like that concept with the national parks where it's called MOOP, material out of place. They're not so concerned with whether something looks messy or not. It's, does it look natural, and is there anything standing out of place? With this methodology, if you see a little stone laying on the bark, you can put it back where the stone belongs. And if you see bark, same thing, move it off the stone and put it over. There's no weed problems here either. But now to get to pruning. There's all kinds of ways to do it, but this one is being done sort of like a giant bonsai. This is the biggest clipper that you need for responsible pruning after about the second year. This is a dog nail clipper from the dollar store. It's actually a really sharp bypass pruner. Doesn't bruise or crush anything. And I left this thing on here just to show that it doesn't even hurt the tree. It's easy to sterilize these too with alcohol, so you don't put different diseases from different trees. Now, the rule that can be applied to almost any growing thing to get this effect is that there's an and there's an or. In order to stay, it has to be up and it has to go out. So that's up and out. But to be removed, it need only do in or down. That removes all the growth from the inside of the tree, and it allows light and air to not only be in this tree, but to be on the ground around it. It also means that this is much easier to protect against varmints, because now we have only one trunkway, and it can be blocked. if this were allowed to be bushy and down to the ground, that's not possible. The other rule about this is if the tree is going to be 10 feet high, you trim it up to 5. If it's going to be 12, 6. You take half of the height of the final tree that you want, or arbor or whatever. It should be cleaned to half that. That means all the growth is in the upper half. You always prune to keep it at the height you want, and that means that it's very easy to harvest the fruit and to see what's going on as well. This thing is just coming on 3 years in the ground, and it's gonna yield Sumatsu plums, and it looks like it's gonna yield a fair amount of them. But this pruning technique is minimally traumatic. The first year, you position it when you plant it the way you think it's going to be oriented and with the sun in mind. And then after it establishes itself, the second year, you do a very heavy pruning, and then you cover them over with tar, a water-based emulsion tar. I'll go back and touch these up with tar later on. But this is how they're done. And I'm going to turn the camera just actively to show that this is a Dancy tangerine. It was done the same way. It's also just coming on 3 years in the ground. It's a little bit of a slow grower, and it's needed quite a bit of shaping in order to fit in with the pattern here. Again, that's about 7 feet tall right now, about 3.5 feet up from the ground. It's been cleaned off. Coming around, it's an elephant heart plum. It's only been in the ground 2 years, and it's going to have some, and it has not had an extensive pruning yet because it had a lot of problems, and there's a goldmine nectarine over there that had the same thing. I thought I lost it the first year, but it's come back. Again, the big advantage to these is they're well put in the ground with a system that would allow them to live even unattended now for years once they get to the groundwater. This is the last one in this particular section of garden, and it has some paleo forage underneath. There's nettles, and there are also russet potato plants. And I do count potatoes as being paleo food, not because I would grow them, but because if I found a potato, I'd fight you for it. I like them. So that's forage. This is a pineapple guava, which is not actually a guava, but it's a really tasty, dark olive green, smooth skin. It's edible. The flowers, which are coming out over here, they're setting flowers. They're really beautiful, almost an orchid-like a flower. They're edible. Again, this is getting the same treatment, but you can see there's some moderation here. This is, again, not quite 3 years in the ground. It's going to need another year or two to really spring up, and so I'm sticking to the same pattern. It's about 8 feet high right now, about 4 feet up. I'm trying to trim to, but I'm letting these grow so they become principal. The idea is not to have any pokies or stuff or anything in the way of the tree being open and clean. That's kind of what's happening here in this part of the garden.